We're calling on all people of goodwill to stand against these extremists who are attacking the poor and women and labor and unemployed people and the sick, and most horribly what's fundamental to our democracy, which are our voting rights. And so with love and faith and commitment and tenacity, this year's Moral March on February the 8th will kick off a fresh year of nonviolent direct action, litigation, and grassroots voter education and empowerment as we continue to say forward together. The Moral March on Raleigh is a part of the anti-racist, anti-poverty, pro-labor, deeply moral, forward together moral movement. With diversity and solidarity, thousands will stand against the constitutionally inconsistent, morally indefensible, and economically insane extreme policies being passed by North Carolina's government and legislature.
Let me pause here for a second and say, everybody that's from North Carolina, raise your hand. But you know what? It doesn't really matter if we're from North Carolina, because when you stand against what's immoral, there is no boundary on state line. But make no mistake, I said at the church, we are outsiders. We are outside of the intoxication of Pope's influence. We are outside the influence of the Koch brothers. We are outside the influence of the Tea Party. And we are here because of what's inside our heart. Inside our hearts, we love everybody. Inside our hearts, we love teachers, and we love children, and we love the sick, and we love the unemployed. And the reason we ain't going nowhere is because there's something down on the inside.
The Board of Elections matched up the registered voters to those who have a driver's license in North Carolina. Okay, they took the registration rolls, the DMV rolls, and matched them up. And they did this in March of this year. There were 318,000 registered voters who did not have a driver's license, didn't show up. And get this now, African Americans are 23% of the registered voters at that time in March of 2013. 23% of the registered voters are African American, but they're 34% of the registered voters who don't have an ID. In other words, they're less than a quarter of the registered voters, but more than a third of those who don't have an ID. That's where they're going after. Women. Women are more than half of the registered voters. We know that. If all the women got together, spoke together, 54% of the registered voters are women. 64%, almost two-thirds of those who don't have an ID, government photo ID from the state, 64% are women.
I am Rosa Nell Eaton, 92 years old. A citizen of Franklin County. I am before you today to speak on voting rights ID. I just want to tell you that I went to jail. I am 92 years old. And I'll tell you why I went. I didn't think I had anything to lose. I have been working for 70 years. I've been a member of the NAACP for 64 years. So, this was the time that I could be of some help. This is the time that I felt like I was needed. Here I am at 92 years old doing the same battling. I have registered over 4,000 citizens in the state.
If you care about the poor, you got to care about the fight for voting rights. If you care about the sick, those being denied Medicare and insurance, you have to care about voting rights. You care about education, you got to care about voting rights. You care about the environment, you got to care about voting rights. You care about labor rights, you got to care, you have to care about voting rights. If you care about the 70,000 people that lost their unemployed this past Monday and the 100,000 that would lose it before the end of the year, you have to care about voting rights, because all of these issues are dealt with by people we elect.
That's exactly right.
And if you care about women's rights,
Yes.
you must care about voting rights.
That's right.
And so the women's rights movement and the civil rights community movement and the voting rights community must hold hands together. Because the same people attacking women's rights are attacking voting rights. But if all of us fight it,
That's right.
if all of us beat it back, if all of us get to the polls, we create a new election.
During the 4th of July week, when legislative leaders thought no one was paying attention, they took a bill that had nothing to do with health care and filled it with restrictions on safe and legal abortion, and rammed it through a committee and onto the Senate floor in one evening because they thought no one was paying attention. But they were wrong. They were wrong. With 12 hours notice, my friends, you and 600 other women's health advocates like you took the legislature by storm. You filled the Senate gallery, spilled out into the rotunda and the streets in front of the legislative building, and stood strong. And you didn't stop showing up, even when they held meetings, as they did repeatedly, with no public notice. Hundreds of you came out as you saw a tweet, and you made clear day after day that North Carolinians believe a woman has the right to make deeply personal health decisions about her body without politicians interfering.
How can you be pro-life if when the child gets here, you cut their education? Pro-life when your budget cuts prenatal care and health care for women? How can you be pro-life when you take money from unemployed families and now they have to decide about rent versus medicine versus food? How is that pro-life? It's not. It's a farce. It's a hot button issue.
Right now, no justice for workers. Too many of us are unemployed or stuck in dead-end, low-wage jobs. We want to work and we want to support our families, but our jobs are too few, our wages are too low, and politicians care too little about working people. We're mobilizing our 110,000 union members to turn out for this moral march because workers are under attack. Those without jobs are called lazy. Those who want a living wage are called greedy. And yet our elected officials doled out hefty raises for their friends, cut taxes for their corporate donors, and they even made sure that unlike wages, campaign contributions can rise with inflation. On February 8th, we marched to bear witness to the unfairness, the immorality of such double standard, but most of all, we marched to bear witness to what can be.
Now we know that teachers are the single most important factor for success in the classroom. This legislature has made our teachers the worst paid in the country. Who here today is agitated because of the attack on our teachers, the attack on our schools, and the attack on the future of our children? That makes you outside agitators. Trust us, they say. Our only concern is for your health and well-being. Well, if the North Carolina legislature is so concerned with our health and well-being, why did they deny health care to 500,000 people in North Carolina?
Our nation is on an irreversible path towards recognizing the full equality of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. And yet here in North Carolina, we remain second-class citizens. Amendment 1 prohibits same-sex couples from marrying. You can still be fired or evicted for being LGBT in our state. Like so many others who we stand shoulder to shoulder with today, we know what it's like to have those in power tell you you should wait an undetermined period of time for equal protection under the law.
La mayor parte de nosotros estamos acá por la situación económicamente, por la extremada pobreza de nuestro país y al mismo tiempo por leyes políticas en nuestro país.
The majority of us are here because of the extreme poverty and the political situations in our home countries.
Y también estamos preguntando y explicando a toda la comunidad que apoye por la reforma migratoria que está en debate ahora en el Senado.
And so we're asking you all to please support us in our fight for an immigration reform that is right now in the Senate.
And we can't ignore this, y'all. Tell your neighbor, we can't ignore this. 1.7 million poor people in North Carolina. One report said more than the population of New Hampshire. This was reported in the Charlotte Observer. 12th highest poverty rate. 40% of minority children living in poverty. 12% of our state living in extreme poverty. We can't ignore this. 14,000 homes where there's no plumbing. 10,000 homes where there's no source of heat. Counties where children go to bed with no food every night. We can't ignore this. And then on top of bad health care, you want to cut education, which is a route to the future. And then on top of that, denying education and doing it hurt to the environment, they also then want to engage in things like fracking and poison the water table. We can't address these problems by having a politic and a political ideology that attacks every safety net. Makes it harder to get public education, harder to get health care, harder to get unemployment, harder to live in a safe environment, but easier for the wealthy to get tax breaks, easier for people to fall through the crack, and easier for people to get guns.
After 13 moral Mondays in Raleigh, leading to almost 1,000 arrests for civil disobedience, demanding redress of our government, and 23 local moral Mondays spanning the state where people have turned up by the thousands, the Forward Together Moral Movement and the HKonJ Coalition will join together once again for the Moral March on Raleigh. Say that with me. Moral March on Raleigh. And the HKonJ People's Assembly. We are saying to our friends near and far, if you believe that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, join us for the Moral March on Raleigh. If you understand that what happens in North Carolina has implications for the future of the South, the future of North Carolina, the future of the nation, join us for the Moral March on Raleigh. If you believe that we can build a moral movement together to save the soul and state of our country, then join us, regardless of your party, regardless of your creed, regardless of your race, regardless of your income, regardless of your sexuality. If you believe in the great principles, the moral principles of justice and equality and fairness for all, then join us for the Moral March on Raleigh. As we tell Governor McCory, the North Carolina General Assembly, and we send the signal throughout this country and throughout the South that there are still those of us who believe in a better way.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me while